Australia's Labour Prime Minister, John Curtin.
I'm happy to be back in Australia. I've seen many things and many places. And although every man can be forgiven for loving his own country best, I believe it is an impartial assessment of the facts to say that I have not seen any country or any people better than my own.
Welcome to Curtin's Cast, the John Curtin Research Centre's podcast, brought to you by myself, Nick Dyrenfurth, and Redbridge's Samaras. Each week, we bring you the freshest and most challenging conversations from the world of Australian and global politics, culture and ideas. Good morning and welcome back, Curtinistas. Welcome back to Curtin's Cast, the John Curtin Research Centre's podcast of politics, culture and ideas. I'm Nick Dyrenfurth, head honcho of the JCRC, joined once again by Australia's leading numero uno pollster, Samaras. How are you, Cos?
Good morning, mate.
I feel like I haven't seen you for a while, but you're back.
Back, yep.
You're in black.
Mm-hmm.
Cos, we're going to be talking about One Nation again, not for the whole show, because we're sick of talking about One Nation, aren't we?
Well, they'll still be relevant to what we're going to be talking about.
Absolutely. We're going to be talking a lot about the upcoming Victorian election, because it's less than 6 months away, Cos. And
Yep.
I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this could prove to be one of the most consequential state elections Australia has seen in decades. Not simply because Labor could lose, but because there are whispers about Jacinta Allan's leadership. We'll touch on that. And not even because Pauline Hanson and One Nation are surging. It's because the entire political system is under strain. Victoria has been Labor's fortress for well over 4 decades, really tracing back to 1982 and the election of John Cain Jr.'s Labor government, which began Labor's hegemony in Victoria. But this election feels bigger than whether Labor can win a 4th term. It raises a much larger question. Is the old political map itself breaking apart in real time? Because I wanted to start with the latest poll overnight. Resolve. Critics can no longer say that Newspoll, Redbridge, Roy Morgan, etc., are wrong. Resolve also has One Nation leading nationally, 29 points to Labor's 28, with the Coalition a distant third on 20. Pauline Hanson doesn't just lead Australia's most popular political party, but she is preferred Prime Minister, 33 to 29 over Albo, and Angus Taylor again a distant third on 16 percentage points. Just wondering, Cos, wanted to cover a couple of questions I think our listeners might have for you. One, it might make sense to us that it's very hard to sort of calculate two-party preferred votes with 3 kind of parties polling relatively similar numbers. What would an election look like if we essentially had One Nation and Labor equal, Coalition on a distant third?
Pretty much close to the MRP that we published about a month ago, I reckon. Most of Labor's primary sitting in the big cities, most of One Nation's primary sitting in the regions. Any increase of the One Nation position usually comes out of those regional pockets. Yes, there might be some more seats that One Nation can win as a result of that. An increase of that primary, though, also means that seats that it's notionally winning from Labor in those urban, peri-urban areas, it would now comfortably win them. Because really the demographic map hasn't changed. It's still the same. There are still significant barriers between what One Nation secures in terms of support and what it does not. For example, Australians speaking another language other than English at home, Labor's two-party preferred votes versus One Nation still in excess of 70%. So when people say, well, we've seen these rallies or forums or gatherings of One Nation supporters and there are diverse people in there, so yep, there are 30%, but the 70% don't vote for them, and through the compulsory preferential system. So it's if you're on the Labor side of politics, you take the 70% as you would with young voters. Only 10% of Gen Z vote for One Nation, and the same stark numbers apply to parts of Australia where there's large numbers of university graduates. So that's the dynamic. So not much has changed. It's just that One Nation's doing better in areas which it's historically been growing presence in. When I say historically, really only the last 12 months. Yeah, that's the picture.
Yeah, the other part of the picture though is gender, because I've noted that there are commentators who suggested that the gender gap that One Nation has historically possessed, with a heavily skewed male vote, heavily skewed older vote, that's narrowed. Is that what you're picking up?
Well, again, you can't lump all Australians into the one bucket.
Yeah.
There's a huge gender gap amongst young women with One Nation, as in they don't vote, they're not voting for them, all right? But One Nation's support amongst baby boomer women and Gen X women is quite significant. So again, it depends on which electorate you're looking at, which part of the country you're looking at, and which generation you're looking at. For example, baby boomer women in Kooyong are not voting for One Nation in huge numbers, but baby boomer women in Farah or the Hunter or Edom and Arrow or those sort of electorates, they are securing quite a lot of support from that generation. So it depends where you are. So I'm really, it's important that we always talk about the nuance of this political landscape, because it is incredibly nuanced. You've got 4 parties at play here. Yes, the Greens are not really all that, I'll say, instrumental in helping us tell this story, because they have lost ground over the last couple of cycles, but they may still win a seat at the next federal election. And of course the coalition, which of course has gone backwards after the budget.
Yes, I was going to check in.
Gone backwards.
We've now got the evidence is in, Cos. The evidence is in, okay? There was no budget bounce for the coalition. In fact, they've gone backwards. They've gone backwards according to Resolve. They've lost 3 percentage points.
Yeah, and according to Angus Taylor, he's blaming Labor for it too. So, that's interesting.
It's a very interesting interview last Sunday for a number of reasons. One, that he blamed the Liberals' poll woes on Labor's budget, which is a very strange observation. I think the more pertinent observation, which struck me at the time, why was Angus Taylor giving an interview to Paul Sakal from 9 newspapers? We love Paul. Why was he even commenting on the polls and the coalition's lack of bounce to a journalist?
Really? I mean, we are now looking at a political party that has no answers to a severe existential problem it's facing. It is not arresting the problem. I would argue it's getting worse. And I'll argue that the current leadership are reaching into a tool bag that belongs back in 2001. Nothing's changed here. They will double down on immigration again this year, which of course is not the epicenter of their problems. I think we're going to see a political party that once upon a time used to be the party of government hold third place for a long time unless something drastically changes.
Yes, and I think had Senator John O'Denium resigned from politics yesterday, Tasmanian senator. Perhaps he's read the tea leaves there, and worked out that they're not going to be in government.
Well, he's a significant loss for them.
He is.
Significant loss, yes. And so that sort of talent, when it starts walking out the door, you've got a problem on your hands. That's a significant blow to them. But we live in interesting times.
We do. And very interesting is Victoria, as I flagged at the top of the show, because one of the most, I think, consequential state elections for a very long time. I'm just trying to think of a more consequential state election. Perhaps we have to go back to 1998 and One Nation breaking through there in Queensland, of course, falling apart after the election, but they won, I think it was 20 seats in Queensland State Parliament. But Victoria, there's quite a bit of chatter around Jacinta Allan's leadership, but you've also done some really fascinating work with your national MRP, which was published 3 weeks ago, and matching up federal voting intention with the picture at a state level as it would translate to the November 26 poll.
Yeah, if you scale that result, that being that result in Victoria into state seats, you get a pretty drastic picture.
Maybe just explain what an MRP is, because we're using a lot of acronyms,
Yeah,
etc.
well,
not everyone knows what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not going to even explain the actual acronym. It's really a large sample is collected. You build a model that is based on ABS number figures and a whole range of other variables, and you use the survey to basically run 1,000 simulations, which then determines and predicts a possible outcome for a particular individual seat. So, for example, if all women between 18 and 28 years of age, if 60% of them are reporting in that large survey to be voting for Labor or the Greens, you then have that in the model, right? And so where electorates have got large numbers of that particular demographic, clearly that's going to skew slightly in the simulation towards Labor. And of course, there are countless other variables in that, because it isn't just that generation that gets put into the model. There are many, many other generations and many other cohorts and many other variables. So that's probably the very quick and simple way of explaining it. Highly labour intensive, extremely expensive. So it's not common, you see. I think it's only YouGov and Redbridge Ascent that does these MRPs on a regular basis. And yeah, so that, I mean, we published that with
remind us about the results of 3 weeks. Again, not everyone listens to the show religiously, apart from the right wing wing nuts.
So the
hello out there if you're actually listening.
The result, the median prediction is 76 seats for Labor or thereabouts. One Nation's is well into the 50s, and the coalition's down to 12 seats, and obviously most of those two independents are re-elected.
Yeah,
that's roughly the result. There are going to be different, if it was an election, and it's very important to make this very clear statement. This is not a prediction of what happens in 2 years' time. It is a temperature read of the electorate right now.
Yeah, it's not a perfect science. Polling and political science is not a perfect science. Okay. But how does it?
There is no perfect science.
There is some scientists would disagree with you there.
Right. Yeah.
Certainly, physicists would disagree with you, but how does this translate to the Victorian state election? Again, bearing in mind that this is not. We're not actually saying this is going to happen on the 26th of November, but we can get a pretty good gauge of the temperature.
Well, not really, because you see, I've scaled that result into state seats, but it's still federal voting intention.
Yeah.
So if we were to conduct an MRP in Victoria, we will more than likely get a different result. And I'll talk in a minute about what that difference may be. But when you scale that result, Labor ends up on 38 seats, Greens on 3, One Nation well over 30 seats, and the coalition gets busted down to the low teens. So that's when you scale that result. So, and it shouldn't surprise anyone, because in that MRP, that federal MRP, One Nation wins Mallee, Nichols, Monash, Latrobe, Casey, Hawke, McEwen, Bendigo, and I can go on. About 9 federal seats. It also does very well in the outer suburbs of Melbourne. And so its impact on the Labor side is quite significant based on this MRP, where basically anything that's out in the outer suburbs that doesn't have a very significant number of Indian Australians, for example, One Nation does pretty well. So it's picking up a lot of seats and picking them up largely off the coalition, but also Labor as well. Now, the difference is that Labor's position at a federal level is higher than it is at a state level right now. We're probably going to be reporting a very significant poll at the end of this month in Victoria, and let's see what that number says. But I would say that Labor's primary is somewhere in the mid-20s at the moment. and the coalition's probably around that space too. And I would say One Nation's either in that space or actually ahead of both of them. And so again, because of that dynamic, you end up with a slightly different result. But if you've got a regional electorate and you're from the Labor or Liberal side, and you're not in those provincial cities, bad news. Unless something changes, One Nation wins a lot of seats.
It's a drastic fall for Labor, isn't it?
Yep.
As far as, to the best of my knowledge, Labor has had a 4 in front of it at the last 3 state elections, unless you can correct me, cause
the primary vote.
Yes.
No, so they ended up on 35 at the last state
35,
election.
Sorry.
Yeah, and they were very quick to applaud themselves that their strategy was about making sure that they gained new territory in Melbourne's eastern suburbs, even though they lost significant skin in those outer suburban safer electorates. Well, that strategy is now coming home to roost, because that's exactly where One Nation is going to be picking up seats unless something changes. And I always say, asterisks, unless something changes. Labor's going to lose seats it's never lost before. And there are a number of MPs right now who think they've got safe seats. They don't have safe seats. Or candidates have been pre-selected for what they think are safe seats, which are not safe seats.
Indeed. I want to talk to, well, let's deep dive into why that's happening, and we're going to reboot Thomas Piketty's Brahmin and merchant classes, and the Brahmin left and the merchant right. But just wanted to dig down into the extrapolation of the federal results to Victorian results. Bearing in mind that not all of our listeners come from Melbourne, Victoria, cause I've done the data crunching. We've got loyal Curtinistas out in WA, South Australia, Queensland,
That's right.
New South Wales. But, there is heartland danger for Labor. We're talking about seats like Werribee, Tarneet, Melton, Sunbury, Sydenham in the west. Out of southeast, Cranbourne, Frankston, Pakenham, Corroy. I'm particularly interested in the Premier's seat there in Bendigo.
Yeah, look, what can we say about what has been going on in Victoria now for some time is what's been going on, I would say, across the country. But it's very acute in Victoria. And it's been, if you look at, historically safer Labor seats around the country at a state level, you could argue that things have been relatively stable, except for, of course, regional Queensland, where they lost significant skin at the last state election. But at a state level, if you go to, for example, New South Wales, in Sydney, they're not losing seats that they've held for some time. Even the state seat of Liverpool, for example, which did absorb a bit of a swing against it at the last state election, it's still relatively okay. And that's because now they're in government and they are focusing on servicing those constituencies because, of course, you don't ignore your traditional base. In Victoria, for a long time, that hasn't been the case. And I obviously had worked for them, and I've seen every budget what was rolled out. And if you're an MP that occupied a marginal seat, rivers of gold would be flowing. Mm. But if you're an MP that basically occupied a seat that was historically a safe Labor seat, you got breadcrumbs, right? And so a really good example of that is that leading up to the 2022 election, the state seat of Greenville was given $60,000. That was it out of the budget. That's fundamentally an illustration of, 60 grand there and, 40 million somewhere else. These are choices that the left side of politics has made now for some time in Victoria, and we're now going to see the consequences of that. And you can change leader if you want, but that's 10 years in the making, right? And so, and that 10 years in the making isn't just about not building their roads, not upgrading their community facilities and so on. It is also about a culmination of a lot of events. So yes, the neglect was there in the first place, but now we have these communities that probably absorbed the greatest economic impact out of the lockdowns.
Yep. And
then throw into that mix, they've also absorbed significant decline in disposable income since the inflationary crisis of 2022 onwards. And of course, they are now probably absorbing the disproportionate impact of fuel prices because, of course, they are very car reliant. And so that's a perfect storm. And I think One Nation will have a good day on come November if nothing changes.
Yes, you're right though. This is it's been a longer term strategic choice, cause it's not just about the allocation. It is about the allocation of resources, but as I wrote in the Australian on Friday, it's also, you know, it's not exclusive to Victorian Labor.
No.
We see the same trends playing out in America with the Democrats, with British Labor, with Labor parties, Social Democratic parties, Socialist parties in Europe, all of which are on life support. It's something which Thomas Piketty identified in his magnum opus Capital, that these parties have identified, or thought they'd sort of found the magic elixir of life, or political life, focusing on graduates, professionals, so-called progressive metropolitan voters, adding on, you know, those diverse constituencies which we've been talking about, and that could sort of replace the old working class, which again is, you know, it's not homogenous, but, you know, in Australia and in Victoria, you know, working class people are overrepresented in outer suburban seats, and my view is that was always, it was intellectually seductive cause, but it was a fantasy that working class and social democratic socialist parties could write off the people who founded these parties in the first place to represent them.
Yeah, correct. And more importantly, it's numerically stupid. I mean, if you think about the numbers, just purely the numbers, there isn't enough of that group that you've just described to win elections. Never has been. Whether you're in the US, whether you're in the UK or in this country, you need, if you're on the centre-left side of politics, you need a large coalition of voters straddling numerous constituencies to win enough seats. And a very key component to that is working class people. Now, the benefit for Labor historically is that over the last 20-odd years, they've been able to replace that constituency they have lost, which is largely regional and to a lesser extent out of suburban, blue-collar, largely white, and they've lost it to the Liberal Party initially, and now they're voting for One Nation and to other parties as well, and replaced it with a diverse constituency, so largely Indian and Chinese diasporas, but also many others, which are now the new working class. And this new working class, particularly in Melbourne, has a different face to it. And I don't just mean by the complexion, it's also they have, like, for example, let's talk about the Indian Victorian community. They are entrepreneurial, small business. That you can find them in the precarious economy. There's no doubt about that. Ranging from low income occupations to working in hospitals, and so they are quite a diverse constituency. They are at the moment voting in very significant numbers for Labor. That is not a permanent trend. That could change in 10 years' time. And because these people are simply at the moment voting for Labor because they feel that the other side of politics doesn't want them in this country. So they should not take that constituency for granted. So their coalition's quite fragile, right?
Yes, as I point out, cause there's a mismatch. If a Labor Party, which is fundamentally progressive, has a mismatch with a lot of these people in these diverse constituencies because they're not uber progressive. They have small c conservative social values.
Yeah,
they're not economic radicals. We've been talking about this non-stop, but it's really worth stressing.
That's true. But right now we go back to Victoria and we talk about what is going to happen in those outer suburbs where you see large numbers of, for example, Indian Australians. Labor should do okay, even against One Nation. This is where there are going to be pockets around the outer suburbs of Melbourne where Labor will hold its seats purely off the back of this constituency. It will do also well in electorates which have got large numbers of people with a university degree or younger voters. And so as you come into Melbourne, you drive from the outer suburbs, you come into the middle urban areas, You go into some of those inner urban areas, Labor will do a lot better. And so we're going to have a quite stark, political geography to look at come November. And of course, things could change, but that's the picture we're looking at the moment.
You mentioned the word education, because that, listeners, is if you want to predict the way people are going to vote, it is now a stronger predictor.
Yes.
I've been writing about this for a while. Another plug for my forthcoming book, Gutsy Politics, Why Being Right is Not Enough for a Left, out with Melbourne University publishing next year. You've been writing about this non-stop, cause,
yep.
And it comes back to Thomas Piketty. Education and having a university degree or not having a university degree is now a stronger predictor of people's votes than class, which is an amorphous concept. But I think the key point to make here, cause again, you mentioned, numbers are everything. There are a lot more people without a university degree in the electorate than with a university degree. It's still, if you have a university degree, that's about 27, 28% of the population. Yes, it's growing, but non-university degree holders are still the super majority.
Yeah, they are in constituencies where you see One Nation dominate, and that's obviously in the regions. There are a number of different things that are driving that. Obviously, these constituencies are older, so we do know that Australians who are under the age of 40, they are over 50% of them have got a university degree, versus over 40, that number starts to drop off and it completely falls through the floor as you hit the baby boomer generation. And the stark contrast there is between, for example, Gen Z millennial women versus baby boomer women. The difference is enormous. So you've got that dynamic. So the age does play into it as well. And the flip side, university degree, when you look at the baby boomer generation, also more likely to be voting Liberal. So if you find a baby boomers with a university degree anywhere in Victoria, for example, or the country, they're going to be a fairly significant block for the coalition, but in particular the Liberal Party. And that's very much large in Victoria. And so, think about Nepean, for example. That's why they won that seat. They've got there is a large, there are large and significant numbers of those people down there. So it varies, but yes, that's the world we're looking at, and Labor better get its skates on, starts representing working class people. And look, I would argue they are doing that at a federal level, but I think at a state level,
clearly with the budget,
they've dropped the ball. Yes.
Clear with the budget, and they're talking the language of class. Cause again, music to my ears, not music to the ears of some right wing legacy media. Cause I want to touch on questions of leadership. There are whispers about Jacinta Allan's premiership. Before that, Cos, I just want to indulge you and listeners and give some advice to the activist class. Cos, we saw last week that there was a lot of moral denunciation around. There were some, there were the high-profile ditch the witch billboards, paid for and distributed by the owner of a well-known Melbourne brothel. Let's be very clear, because those billboards deserve condemnation. They were clearly sexist, clearly misogynist. But I have to say, Cos, I've never seen Labor activists and progressive activists, particularly on social media, so animated by a particular issue. I haven't seen an equal level of passion about a child in Melbourne's northwest going hungry or being sent to school on an empty stomach. I haven't seen the same level of passion about housing stress, whether it's mortgage or rental stress, people being able to access a GP, hospital waiting lists, crime and community safety. It's a memo to the activist class, professional managerial class. Politics has to be capable of holding two truths at once. That yes, those billboards are awful, but if anyone thinks that on November 26th, most people will probably pre-poll, won't they? Because this is state election, they're not going to walk into those voting booths and be thinking, "Oh, wasn't it dreadful that Jacinta Allan was depicted as a witch, and we're going to swing behind Labor." I don't mean to trivialise things, but we have to start where people are, and that they're being smashed materially. They're cranky and they're angry, and I think that they can hold two truths at once. That yes, this was sexist and misogynist, but it's not going to determine their vote.
It was on page 2 of the Herald Sun. Should have stayed there. Unfortunately, the response made sure it didn't.
Yes.
So strategically, it was stupid. And I noticed a number of MPs who, some of them are probably talking about removing her as Premier, post on their socials, and they were simply just promoting the stupid billboard. And it was strategically stupid. If I was working for them at the time, I would have shut it down. You should have just let it die on page 2 of the Herald Sun. It's where it belonged. So, yeah, it was strategically dumb, self-indulgent, comes across to the electorate as being obsessed about yourselves.
Yes.
And then you wonder why you're getting completely creamed at the ballot box.
I know. And listen, critics are going to say, oh, Nick and Cos are talking about this, okay? But we have to talk about it to tell people not to talk about it. I know that seems a bit ironic. It's classic dead cat strategy, and I don't know why people fed into it.
Yeah. I mean, we could talk about the general inequity that women in Victoria are facing in particular occupations that are
caring professions.
Horrific. Well, if you're a woman and you're working in a warehouse at the moment, being run out of Amazon, for example, your life is pretty miserable because you're getting basically managed to the inch of your life by AI algorithms that are in place in that workplace. So yeah, look, we can talk about for hours about what other women are experiencing, domestic violence, mental health, the countless pressures that they're experiencing right now in the outer suburbs and regions in trying to balance that family budget. We can go on for hours, but no, look, bottom line is stupid billboard, horrific, all of that, strategically stupid, responding and amplifying it.
Yes, it's a bit like shutting down or attempting to shut down a One Nation fundraiser.
Yeah, that's
exactly. It's the own goal. It's just a mega political own goal.
I didn't know about it until, sure enough, reports start coming out there was going to be protest against it. So none of us knew about it, and within 3 days, we also knew about how much money they were raising too. So again. It makes no sense to me why people just keep promoting the activities and successes of a political party that you're opposing. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway.
On leadership, Cos, again, we can't avoid the fact that there are whispers around Jacinta Allan's leadership. If you're running the show, what would you do? Are we holding tight?
I would not be running the show. And also, but more importantly, more importantly, if people within the Labor caucus think that a leadership change is the fix to a problem, you're not just spent this podcast talking about 10 years of this being in the making.
20 years.
20 years even. No, look, I'd be fair to the Brumby government.
I'm talking about global political terms. We're talking about
of course, that's right, correct. Yes,
trends that are stretched out over 2-3 decades, really.
That's right.
But Victoria, yes, it's a decade. Yeah,
a decade. And so, the same individuals that are now asking for her to be removed are the ones that used to applaud the policy framework that's got them in this predicament in the first place. Mm. So I'm not sure a change will make a difference. I'm not going to comment on it. It's no real point in adding more fuel to a fire that's still burning and burning for different reasons. No,
it seems like the job, Cos, is to be focusing on seats like Melton and Werribee and Frankston, Bendigo. Bendigo's particularly important.
Yeah.
And the regions.
Yeah, that's it. So we'll find out come November in terms of what that world looks like. It's going to boil down to if Labor can move its primary vote to the high 20s. I know it's weird me saying that, but that's the new world we're living in. High 20s, it could get to 45 with that vote. Can the coalition get the 45 off its own steam? No, that's for sure now. So if there's going to be a change of government, and that's still a high possibility, it will be a mix of One Nation and the established coalition parties forming that government. But it will be a question as to which one of those two actually has the larger number of seats.
Exactly, because I think we can safely say Victoria can produce a one nation breakthrough on the 26th of November in where John Howard once called the Massachusetts of Australia's South. Nowhere in Australia is immune. Curtin, we've run out of time. Thank you, Samaras, for your wisdom and insights. Once again, thank you, listeners. Don't forget to check us out on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. We'll catch you next week when we're chatting to Anna Goldsworthy about her new quarterly essay on AI and whether we've created the god of AI. But for now, it's ciao, not arrivederci.